I have two chessable courses that are currently on sale. They're on sale till, I think, midday on Saturday. So less than 24 hours to get one of these. So what are my two courses are on sale? Well, one is on the Kalashnikov Sicilian that goes like this. Repertoire for black after e5. And the other course that's on sale is my anti-Sicilians repertoire for black. So basically anything that white does here which doesn't involve knight f3 and d4. So for example, the Alapin, there's a recommendation for black, or knight c3 going into a Grand Prix attack, or indeed the Rossolimo, which is a very popular variation. And against this, I recommend knight f6. And I wanted to give you an update on this variation because there's a bit of a trend going on which is worth knowing about. So I spotted this game, played fairly recently in the Polish Team Championship, played in September between Igor Janik, who is from Poland, and playing black Paulius Pultinevicius from Lithuania. I hope my pronunciation wasn't too bad. Both grandmasters, both in their early 20s. Janik played e5. I should just mention, what's the point of knight f6? The idea is that, you see, in this position, very often white wants to play c3 and d4 quite quickly. But after knight f6, that rather upsets white because you have to do something about the e-pawn. And the two most popular moves are either e5 or knight c3. When white plays knight c3, then it's not possible to play c3 and d4, and my recommendation is g6. e5 is also possible, but in this case the knight hops into d5. And then this is a very nice move, knight c7. Just putting the question to that bishop. If it goes back, then somehow, white, it's not so brilliant. Basically, this pawn can be rather rounded up, and you can always go d6 as well. Normally, white just exchanges on c6, and throughout this repertoire, I recommend recapturing with the d-pawn. It just makes development much easier for black because this bishop can get into the game very easily. Very often you want to play bishop g4 here, and then the knight comes to e6, and then you can bring the knight to the outpost d4. White played h3, obviously to avoid that, but this was a little bit careless. Now, normally in a lot of these variations I'm recommending g6 and bishop g7 and castles, which is very solid, but in this case, as black hasn't yet played g6, it's possible to play more aggressively. With h6, notice black hasn't castled yet and white has. Bishop f5, developing the queen side. Knight e6, that is such a nice square. The knight looks at the outpost here, looks at these important squares, and it blockades that e-pawn solidly. Knight c4 and g5, so obviously this is why h6 was played. Very aggressive, and with that pawn on h3, that gives it's a hook. Could be that black is simply going to break open the g file with g4. That is very dangerous already. Therefore, white felt provoked into playing g4. But of course, this creates serious weaknesses around the king, and black is itching to play h5 and open things up. Rook e1. Well, I mean, actually, it wouldn't be so silly to go for h5 straight away, but that pawn could be taken. Instead, black plays, I think, very nicely queen c7 and castles before taking action on the king side. It's not the only way to play, but, well, this is obviously incredibly sharp, putting the king over here, and then that gives you a free hand on the king side. And already this looks like a lot of fun. Whoops, A lot of fun for black. Bishop g7. f5. So with bishop g7, the rooks are connected. And now it is time to make that break. If this is taken en passant, then you could play h5 afterwards, or maybe f5. White decides to just go for it. It's quite clear this is going to turn into a race. Who's faster? Black's attack on the king's side or white's attack on the queen's side? And yeah, this doesn't look so bad. You know, there aren't many pieces around black's king. Black played rook f8, a very calm move actually, and it is good for black. But it is getting rather tricky. Exchange of pawns and knight f4. Knight plunges in, and white decided couldn't live with that knight, so exchanged it off. Threat, rook takes pawn, and knight h2. Well, I'm sure black was delighted to see the knight retreat to that miserable square. And it's looking tremendous for black. Black now played h5, which looks fantastic, but actually my machine isn't that impressed by h5, even though it looks like a very human move, looks very logical to open up the h file. In fact, the machine wants to play rook f8, tying white to this pawn, and actually just playing quite calmly with bishop f7, just looking to take here and take on e5, and big advantage to black apparently. Interesting, but well, our Lithuanian friend playing with black wants to rip open white's king, and that's very understandable. This is a very human way to play. And white, I think very sensibly, simply ignored that pawn and played a5, just wanting to roll on the queen side. And yeah, the machine approves of this. Actually, it's interesting. It feels very slow, but actually after a6, yeah, you can see lines are opening. Bishop f7, swinging this bishop round. Takes, queen takes, rook b1. Yeah, this is looking a little bit more serious now, because lines have opened up for those rooks. It's such a tense position. And here, well, probably, I'm guessing, we're already in the time pressure phase. This was a classical game, but just to get to this point would have involved enormous calculation. In this position, white actually has a winning move. So here's my challenge for you. Can you spot white's winning move? I know I should be advocating black's position because, you know, this whole line, this whole system for black, I think is really pretty good. But this is a fascinating position. I'm going to switch it round for you. White play. White actually has a winning move in this position. What is the winning move? That's my challenge for you. You have a think. I'll have a drink. Cheers, folks. White to play. In the game, white played knight d6 check, which doesn't look bad at all, but it doesn't win. The move is actually d4. Now that is a very cool move. I mean, one thing is it secures e5 for a moment, but the basic idea is that it starts to open up this diagonal, and black doesn't have a good defense here. So here's the basic idea. If rook takes pawn, for example, knight d6 clears the diagonal for the queen, and this is just too much for black to bear, basically. For example, if queen d7, okay, I think that one's pretty easy. And if rook takes, rook b7, and you can see that queen is trapped. It's a beautiful move, d4, fantastic move. But instead, knight d6 check was played. Now I'm going to flip the board back from black's viewpoint. Incredibly, this is a mistake. I think white had seen this whole idea of bringing the queen in, but did it in the wrong order, because after this, yes, if the queen moves, then d4 is incredibly powerful. But in this position, black found an extraordinary counterattack. G3 just ignored the threat to the queen and kept going. And if pawn takes queen, well, the game careers on, but black has enough counterplay here. The variations run a very long time, but basically this winds up in a position which is actually okay for black. Let's go back. But after g3, white was obviously thinking, well, I can win this. And he took this. And then queen takes pawn. Another incredible move. Giving the queen for the second time, again to a pawn capture. And this time, white decided to take the queen. It was a mistake. Bishop d4 check. Bishop d5. Look at those fantastic bishops. Knight f3. g4. What a fantastic move. Looking simply to take on f3. And white does not have a good defense here. Here's how the game went. d7. Here. Well, if that rook is taken, then this is actually winning. Rook g8. Bishop takes. You've got two beautiful bishops. In fact, white just went crazy here and played rook takes. That got taken. Then this was taken here. White played king f1 here. And that was the final move of the game. Now, I don't know whether white resigned or lost on time, but, well, after king f1, check. And obviously with an extra rook and a bishop, that's winning. Instead of king f1, king h3 is possible, but this is a losing endgame. Still takes a little bit of technique, but basically this rook is coming in, attacking the pawns, but that's a clear win for black. It's a fantastic game, but if I can kind of sum up, I've noticed a trend for some players to capture on c6, exchange on c6 at quite an early stage, before black has played g6. Not just in this position, but also this position as well. But this does give black extra possibilities when you haven't played g6. You can go for h6 and g5 in some positions. It's just worth bearing in mind. Particularly if white plays e5. Another way of playing this position is actually to play knight d7 and to play e5 and so on. Playing bishop g4 very quickly and then knight d7 and e5. So what I'm saying is that if white exchanges on c6 very early, you don't have to go for g6. You can develop your queenside quickly. This is a nice idea. And in some cases, as in this game, you can actually play h6 followed by g5. So it just gives black a few more options if the exchange takes place on c6 and you haven't played g6. Just something to watch out for. Anyway, just to repeat, my two courses, the anti-Sicilian repertoire for black and my Kalashnikov Sicilian course, they're both on sale till around about midday UK on Saturday. So do check out the links to Chessable. Thanks for watching.